wheels bending, broken rule. Hound dog howling, bullfrog croaking. Everything is broken.
Hello and welcome to another episode of DadsDivorce Live. Today we have with us Kristin Zurek from Cordell & Cordell. We're going to talk about counselors and psychologists and their usefulness and applicability in the legal field, as well as how we can appropriately use them at trial. Kristin, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dan. I appreciate it.
And I know you've been a guest on our show numerous times and just given valuable information to the individuals who log on to our site. And today we're going to talk about psychologists and counselors and how we can really effectively use them at trial and to be able to advocate on behalf of the client. And I know it's kind of a broad topic, but let's kind of break it down and let's start with the psychologist first. What has been your experience in getting a psychologist on board? What would be the first step?
Well, let me break it down a little bit, Dan, and talk first and most important for the clients that are listening. Recognize, first of all, that divorce is probably the most emotional thing your family's ever going to go through, okay? Kids, no matter how well-adjusted you think they might be, are going to need somebody to talk to. They're going to need someone to talk to that's not either you or your wife about their feelings about the situation, because all of a sudden, we have a household that's now broken up.
Right.
So I'm going to tell everybody who's listening, one of the best things you can do is suggest counseling for your children. Don't be scared about what might come out about you or what might come out about your wife. It will make you look like a bigger person to the judge because you're putting your kids' needs first.
And with that, now can you get counseling mandated by the court?
You can. The court, depending on the situation, you can ask for it early on if you think it's going to help the family. But frankly, it's something you and your attorney should push for with her and her attorney to get everybody on board to make sure your kids are taken care of through this.
Once you meet with your attorney and you determine that you want to get a psychologist on board, whether it be for mom or yourself or the child, what is the next step?
The next step would be to talk to your attorney about psychologists that they might be working with or have worked with in the past that they trust and that they think do a good job. I mean, I can tell you I have a list of about 10 people in my desk that I know help my clients in various situations. Some are more suited to adult therapists, some are more suited to children, but I also make sure that my list encompasses people that are comfortable coming to court to testify.
Now, you raised an interesting point when you said their comfort level more suited. When you're deciding whether or not to get a psychologist, you want to make sure that that person is well trained in the field dealing either with children or adults, right?
You are very correct, Dan. That's an absolute necessity. I'm not by any means suggesting that you should simply go out and get a therapist to bring someone to court to say you're a good parent to your child. At some point in time, that might be something you need for your case. But you need to make sure there's a lot of people out there that are practicing therapists, and you want to be sent to someone who can help your case and help your family. So you rely on your attorney and their expertise to help you get to those professionals that might be able to help you not only in your litigation but in your family life as well.
Sure. Once we determine who we want to use, do I need to file something with the court and have that be part of the record, or to have the court be able to enforce the evaluation? No,
the good course is to, if you have a guardian ad litem on your case, if, say, the opposing party is reluctant to start counseling, have the guardian ad litem lean on the opposing party to get counseling started. It's a really effective tool that I use in a lot of my cases where mom is not supportive of counseling. Sometimes I have had to go to court and ask for counseling as part of a PDL or an interim or a temporary motion, and that way if someone still isn't supportive of it, then there's enforcement mechanisms behind that.
Sure.
But you have to recognize that this is a really tough thing. Divorce is really, really tough, and you're going to need some help going through it. Your friends who have gone through it, your family members who have gone through it, might not have the same facts and circumstances as you.
As you're tuning in, when we're discussing psychologists, it's not something that's automatic. It's not going to be in every case that you're going to need a psychologist.
No, you're 100% right, Dan. And I'll tell you, let's take the kids, for example. If your kid is, we split the houses up, if your kid's going back and forth without much issue, maybe you just have the school counselor check in on him once in a while and make sure he's all right. You know, you're going to have some kids that actually have some behavioral problems and have a hard time going back and forth between houses. And those are the cases that are probably more appropriate to be referred to a psychologist or a family therapist to help deal with the situation. Now, if you want to bring a family therapist into court, you need to have your attorney make sure that they're comfortable in coming to court. Some family therapists, they don't feel comfortable coming to court because they don't want to break the patient-therapist bond and come to court to relay everything that either a kid or an opposing party has said to them in counseling. So your attorney and you really need to work together to sort of tread lightly to figure out how to best use the information gleaned in counseling to your advantage if that was your purpose in getting counseling in the first place.
Sure. Now, we've been talking about counseling with children, and we have a lot of people who write in or call in, and they either have a psychologist or they have a counselor. Is there any benefit to having one over the other?
No. You know, a social worker is usually a counselor. A psychologist usually has a master's or a PhD. They're all competent professionals, but you know, psychologists and counselors all differ, and they all have different specialties. You know, some focus just on adults, some focus on children, some focus on addiction, some focus on abuse, and it's never really delineated in the phone book who does what. And so you really do need to sort of comb through, use your attorney, comb through your friends, find out who they've used and liked to zone in on someone who might actually be willing to help you and can help you and your family.
Sure. Now, we've been talking about counseling and psychologists with children involved, and each case is different, and not everybody's going to have children that are involved in a divorce. So when you do not have children that are involved, can you still use a psychologist?
Yes, you absolutely can. Say, for example, you've had a very violent relationship, and say your wife has been, you know, both emotionally and physically abusive to you, and you've been seeking some counseling to deal with that situation. If you're saying misconduct during the marriage in the form of her abuse to you should be taken into account in the final division of property, you're certainly going to want to bring your marital counselor or your personal counselor into court to testify about some of the things you've disclosed to him or her. So adults can use it as well. I mean, the important thing for everyone to know while they're listening to this is, as long as you're focused on your litigation, it's very, very hard sometimes to turn the focus outward to go, okay, once I'm done with this situation, how am I going to pick up and move on? And by getting some outside help in terms of counseling, whether it's for your children or whether it's for you, it helps you to say, all right, once the lawyers are out of my lives and I'm not fighting anymore, how can I pick up the pieces, move forward, and be an effective parent or be an effective adult and deal with the situation that I find myself in?
It's a good transition.
It's an absolute good transition. And, you know, I'd also encourage you guys to find a counselor that's actually covered under your health insurance, or if they're not, many places will do sliding scales to help you out.
Now, if you're going to see a psychologist to help you and help with the transition, is that information discoverable?
The sum and substance of what you have talked about with your counselor, it is my understanding, is protected under the rules of evidence, much like when you're talking to a priest about your confessions or you're talking to a doctor about your health information. It's covered under HIPAA laws as well as covered under the rules of evidence. So in order for it to be discoverable, the other attorney needs to jump through a whole bunch of hoops to get their hands on that information, and they have to be willing to argue to the court as to why they think it would be relevant.
So it's a high burden to prove.
It's very high burden
those
to
of
prove.
you who are out there listening to this, continue with your counseling or in your therapy without having the stress to think that, well, maybe this is going to be discovered by my spouse's attorney. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but again, thank you for coming down, spending part of your day with us, and explaining the risk and rewards of psychologists and counselors.
Thank you, Dan.
My name is Dan Cuneo. I'm your host, and please join back in for another episode of DadsDivorce Live. Thank you.